In the media, Latina women have long been depicted through flawed and demeaning stereotypes. They are continuously sexualized, portrayed as domestic workers, victimized as weak mothers, and exoticized for their foreign appearance. Celebrities such as Shakira and Jennifer Lopez have been characterized as such stereotypes to draw a larger audience. These representations are made palatable for American consumption. Unfortunately, media depictions have a lasting implication on the ways in which people from these ethnic communities are perceived and treated by society. In particular, Latina women are rendered exotic, weak, servile, and vulnerable in the eyes of Hollywood.
According to Charles Ramirez Bird, the history of Latino images in U.S. cinema surrounds 5 basic stereotypes. The objective of these stereotypes is to provide opportunities for an exemplary male protagonist to display his absolute preeminence and indicate the inferiority of his counterparts of color. Hollywood producers generated a status quo that acclaims a white Anglo-Saxon lifestyle and denigrates all people of color, especially women. These minor representations of women of color created faulty and exaggerated assumptions about ethnic and racial groups due to the habituation of the coded messages.
According to Alberto Sandoval Sanchez, Carmen Miranda stands for the Latina stereotype of the gay señorita who is always dancing and advocating the enjoyment of life, inciting passion and sexual desire through her exotic looks. Miranda's song, South American Way, maps the stereotypical representation of Latin America as a land of romance, where all worries are forgotten. The tropics signal sexual liberation and leisure time. Latin America offers a crazy good time and dreams of love. Within this prejudiced and racist way of seeing, Latinas in the film are one-dimensional. But beyond being over-sexualized, Latina women have also been historically ignored in Hollywood productions. In the film Zoot Suit and West Side Story, women are continuously dismissed and cast as secondary and supportive roles to the male-dominated plotline.
Given the implications of Latina stereotypes, we wondered how these media depictions have affected the experiences of Latinas at Dartmouth, and how these women are fighting such negative stereotypes. We pursued this research by interviewing 4 Latina seniors who have unique experiences and who can speak on behalf of what it means to be Latina. Here is what they have to say.
My name is Jolie Lopez. I am studying geography and Spanish and Portuguese here, and I'm from Oxnard, California.
My name is Teresa Alvarado Patlan. I was born in Central Mexico, but now I reside in the suburbs of Chicago. And I am a Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean Studies major, so that's LATS.
Yeah, my name is Nicole Amanda Velez. I am studying environmental studies and African American studies, and I call Bronx, New York home.
Hi, my name is Alexis Castillo. I'm from Salinas, California, and I'm studying sociology.
How do you define your identity?
I tell people I'm Puerto Rican and Ecuadorian, but I have realized in the recent years I always start with the fact that I'm Puerto Rican before I'm Ecuadorian, which I found interesting.
I define my identity as being Latina, but at the same time having white privilege because I am, or I do look white.
Does your culture or ethnicity influence your identity?
Definitely. I mean, tattoos. So this one's a sol, and these are both Taíno symbols. And then this was coqui, and it's like in Puerto Rico, we pretty much have like crickets, or they sound like there are Puerto Rican crickets, and it just goes coqui, coqui the whole night. And we also have like a Spanish eggnog called coquito, so that's what this is from. But yeah, they're very, very common in Puerto Rico. Like I'm very close with both sides of my family. I think I'm closer to the Puerto Rican culture just because of how close it is to New York. Like I've only been to Ecuador once. So I can visit a lot of my family that's in Puerto Rico more than I can for Ecuador. So,
How has your identity shaped your experiences at Dartmouth?
At Dartmouth, my identity has provided me with a specific path in the things that I want to explore, the academics that I want to focus in, and the way that I approach community and social life on campus. So, for example, I identify more with specific people on campus and with others, and I also attend specific events and participate in certain classes that are based in the way that I find passion in my identity.
Yeah, so I feel like coming to Dartmouth changed my reference of the Latinx community, and that, you know, back home I was, you know, my city's 98% Latinx, and Dartmouth, there are like a lot less of us. So I feel like I'm somebody who at least like found comfort in like certain Latinx groups on campus. I felt that being here really helped me like learn more about my own culture. So for instance, last spring I took like a Mexican muralism class, and I learned so much more history about Mexico that I just, you know, I wouldn't have learned that from my parents, or I wouldn't have known how to go about that if I wanted to do like my own research.
How do you navigate Dartmouth as a Latina?
I navigate Dartmouth as a Latina by focusing on spaces where I feel welcome and safe, and also spaces that allow me to challenge myself. So in terms of classes, very critical thinking classes where I can have different opinions and work towards understanding others' perceptions is one of the components that drives my Dartmouth experience based on my identity as a Latina. And also entering specific social scenes where I feel safe as a woman and as a woman of color.
For those of us that have a more white appearance, it's very easy to disconnect ourselves with the Latinx community and to assimilate. And so for some time I used to just disengage, and I used to think, oh, I'm not American in that way. And I always thought of that way as like your typical American. But then now that I'm coming to the end of it, it makes me realize that being Mexican is being American, and how I can have my two identities even though some people perceive me as just one.
How do you navigate Dartmouth as a Latina woman?
It's difficult, especially when you feel like a majority of like people look past you, and like even in like the dating scene, I feel like that has played a role in like just not being comfortable in like generic places where you would find someone, whether that be like a frat basement where it's just like generally people, and especially women of color, don't feel comfortable in.
Has that changed over time?
I think over time I've gotten used to it, and I think I've accepted it and just like been okay with it. I think it's still, that feeling's there. I've just learned how to like deal with it and ignore it and just like not value white man's attraction, I guess. I don't know. Like in the beginning I was like so like, okay, like these are like the majority of people, and I feel like I want them to be attracted to me and like feel part of like especially social life, and now I'm just like, no, I'm okay. Like I'm good.
Do you think people construct your identity?
Oh, 100%. I think for most of my life, I never thought of myself as American, and I thought other people perceived me as being Latina, and until I came to college, that's when I realized, oh snap, like you're not just Latina, you're white. And I didn't understand why when I would say that I speak Spanish, they would become very surprised, and they would ask, oh, did you learn in high school? And it's like, no, that was my first language. So I think it was the first time that I had to understand that I was Mexican, because I thought before it was just known.
Back at high school, like people would call me Jennifer Lopez because I was like the one of like two Latinx people in the grade, and I was the only Latina, or like, yeah, not a lot of us. So just like the fact that like my nickname was J-Lo.
What are some of the stereotypes or expectations of Latina women that you've encountered?
Some stereotypes of Latina women that I've encountered are that we are all the same thing as Shakira. Like, we're all Shakira. Just because, like, for me, I'm short, I'm brown, and I've gotten Shakira or J-Lo, Beyonce. But there's this kind of, like, exotification of women that all Latinas have to embody, like, something exotic and something physically curvy and showy. And in terms of expectations as a Latina, I have felt the pressure to always be the loud person or to always be the commanding force in a specific room. So those are the two main ones.
I think expectations of being a Latina woman come from caring and from being motherly and just accepting people and really making them feel like home. And I think that emotional labor takes a toll when you aren't able to say no and you aren't able to put yourself first. And you become really tired because you notice that you're taking care of other people and you're putting other people first and you're not taking care of yourself.
Do you think the media has a role in the construction of identity?
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like the role of media, at least here at Dartmouth, that's when I really started to understand how other people see Latinos. Especially with being in my all-white sorority, where their only perception of Latinidad or being Latina was in the food and in Shakira and in these stereotypes that shape women as being exotic and they objectify them.
I think media has a role in the fact that there is this conceived notion of what a Latina woman looks like, and it just perpetuates. There's negative perceptions of women as just being quote unquote welfare queens or just being angry or being exotified. So I do think that media has not done a good job at balancing the identity of women of color, specifically Latinas, because it is not something that they have genuinely cared about. I think that the objectifying of women of color, specifically, Latinas, as something exotic and something that is there for pleasure kind of, in a way, hinder the power that Latinas have, both in social spheres and media spheres, and that manifests in Dartmouth with different communities. It doesn't matter what community it is, there's these ingrained notions of what it means to be a Latina woman that constantly follow you, and it is through you understanding them and challenging them that you can find a space, but they don't necessarily just fade, they persist.
How do you counter or fight these perceptions?
I personally counter these negative perceptions of Latina women by actively proving people wrong and engaging in dialogue. I'm a big proponent of understanding where these stereotypes and where these ideas come from in other people, and just having a space where I listen to them, but I also make sure that they listen to my reasoning of why it is a bad thing to stereotype women like that.
I think in terms of fighting perceptions, it's still something that I'm trying to navigate, right? So I think there's something that I've learned here. It's you can educate other people about your experiences, but I think there comes a point where you can't just educate everybody, and to some extent that can also be harmful for the people who feel obligated to educate others. But I definitely think that is one way for people who feel comfortable doing so, sharing your own experiences, being hey, I'm X person from this background, I'm here, I'm working hard, I'm right next to you in class, I exist, my experiences are valid.
How would you define yourself?
I am making new path each day for my family, I would say. I'm a path maker. I'm a path maker.
I am a proud woman of color who actively fights against systems of oppression.
We're strong, independent women. We can do anything on ourselves.